welcome back to the channel. I hope you've been enjoying the book reviews that I've been doing, because I've been enjoying remembering these books and also going through the different books that I've that I have on my bookshelf to read. I have quite a bit that I still have to read. Anyway, I first was exposed to Jeeves and Wooster by watching the PBS show. I mean, obviously it was not the PBS show in England, but here in the United States, the show Jeeves and Wooster was broadcast on PBS. So that was my first exposure to Jeeves and Wooster. So I was watching the show and thoroughly enjoying it. It was also my first exposure to Hugh Laurie and Stephen Fry. Those two make an amazing comedic duo. If you are from the United States and the only exposure you have to Hugh Laurie is from the TV show House, and Stephen Fry. I know Stephen Fry was in, I think it was the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes movies, and he was also in the TV show Bones for a while. So if those are the only exposure you have to those two actors, you need to check out Jeeves and Wooster. It's very different for those two. Anyway, My Man Jeeves, this is one of the older Jeeves books, published first in the early 1900s. It's like, I'm trying to pull that up here. I had it a second ago and then I closed that particular tab, so now I'm opening it back up again. It was first published in 1919, it looks like. Yeah, originally published in 1919. So this has some Jeeves and Wooster story, Jeeves and Wooster stories, but it also has some Reggie, what's his name? Reggie Pepper. Now Reggie Pepper, from what I gather and what people call Reggie Pepper was originally was P.G. Wodehouse's conception for Wooster, and so he wrote the Reggie Pepper stories first, and out of doing that and refining his ideas, he came up with Bertram Wilberforce Wooster, who goes by Bertie to his friends. So if you've never read anything by P.G. Wodehouse, he is a English humorist author. His stories are, from what I've read, I can't say that I've read his entire bibliography. His writings are all humorous. I wouldn't say laugh out loud funny, and sometimes it can be kind of cringe, as the saying goes. Maybe I should rephrase that and say they're cringe worthy. Anyway, in My Man Jeeves, there are several stories of Jeeves and Wooster, and then several Reggie Pepper stories together. So a few of the stories, if you have seen the Jeeves and Wooster television show, you will recognize the stories that they then adapted to the television show. Because the first one is in this collection, is when Bertie is trying to help his friend Bruce Corky Corcoran. He's an artist. He has a very wealthy uncle who is giving him an allowance, and he's trying to convince his uncle to give him more money so that he can get married. And in the process, the uncle is introduced to the fiance in a rather complex roundabout way, and through a series of events, he ends up painting Corky ends up painting a portrait of his nephew that his uncle absolutely detests, and because of that, refuses to pay him, and then how he translates that into a future income for himself. So that's one of the stories. There's also another story where Bertie's Aunt Agatha sends a friend of hers to visit him, and this friend is a prison reformer and documentarian, and is going around to the prisons in the United States. Bertie, so Bertie is English, and so is his butler, but a number of their escapades happen in the United States. So his aunt sends her friend, and her friend dumps her son, who is a grown man, on Bertie, and basically makes him Bertie's responsibility. I do like the books, but there were so many times in the books where I'm just sitting there going, look, you need to really stand up for yourself, Bertie. You really need to do this and say, look, this is not my responsibility. I'm not going to have anything to do with this, and walking away. But he never does. And that's somewhat what makes up the comedic situation in many instances, is Bertie's inability to walk away from things that are not his responsibility. But as soon as this lady leaves and her son is now out from under her thumb, he immediately just starts living the high life. He's in New York. He no longer has parental supervision, and like I said, he is a grown man, but he is very henpecked by his mother. He just immediately goes on a spree. Drinking, binging, all sorts of stuff, and he ends up in prison. And so it's then up to Jeeves to extricate Bertie from the situation, and that's a lot of times what happens. Bertie is well-meaning but not very intelligent, and Jeeves is the proper English gentleman's gentleman. He is incredibly intelligent and insightful, and even though his schemes don't always work out the way he plans them, they do work out. And Bertie is, at that point, usually a beneficiary of the ending. However, sometimes Bertie does end up being the butt of the joke in some cases. So another story, Bertie has a friend whose uncle is again giving him money, and there's a lot of these situations where one of Bertie's friends is getting money from a relative, and he'd like to increase his allowance so that he can do this, that, or the other, just live better sometimes. And so this is one of those cases, and his uncle comes to visit, and they agree to let Bertie's friend use his apartment and Jeeves to make the impression that he's doing well. And this, of course, backfires, because the uncle is like, well, if you're doing so well, why am I paying you money? And so then they have to figure out a solution to this problem, because obviously the reason that they were trying to get more money is because he didn't have enough. So at this point, it was either I got to come up with something, or I'm going to have no livelihood whatsoever. Another Bertie story, and again, it is kind of interesting the way they've woven these together for the television show, because Bertie has a friend named Rocky Todd, and his aunt is again paying for his support, but he is trying to do things on his own. He's a poet and things. He's trying to get his poetry published, and his aunt is paying for his upkeep and things. And so his aunt, who is a hypochondriac, demands that he go and live in New York and use her money to live the high life that she wishes she could have lived for herself. And so he doesn't want to do that. He'd much rather live out in the country where he's away from the city, because that's not his thing. And so they start writing letters to the aunt on behalf of Rocky, and then she shows up in New York, and she's like, your letters have touched me and gotten me out of my bed and things. And so now it's up to them to try to figure out a way of getting rid of the aunt, so that Rocky can go back to his previous lifestyle of living in the country and just enjoying his solitude. And if you know anything about the television show, you'll recognize that the previous entry about the uncle, and they're using they're using Wooster's apartment, and Jeeves is supposed to be the valet for the friend, and then the Rocky Todd episode, you'll understand, or you'll know that those two stories were woven together. And in the short stories, they have nothing to do with each other. They're separate episodes. As I said, in addition, there are some Reggie Pepper stories in this collection. Now, as I said, Reggie Pepper was kind of a prototype for Wooster, and one of the stories in here is about Reggie and his very, very forgetful friend. His friend just he forgets things. He got in trouble with his wife for forgetting their anniversary, and then she ends up leaving him and says she won't come back until he remembers her birthday. And you'll note that particular story got rewritten as a Jeeves and Wooster story about a friend who met a girl, couldn't remember her name or where she lived, and what went on to bring those two back together. There's also another one about helping Freddie that was rewritten and fixing it for Freddie, where where Wooster's friend and his fiance broke up, and then how they fixed that. There's also a story called Rallying Round Old George that was rewritten as a Mr. Molyneux story, and Doing Clarence a Bit of Good, which was rewritten as Jeeves Makes an Omelet. So there's these other stories in there that they're funny, they're entertaining. Not very long. This book is actually pretty short, but very entertaining, very well worth your time. The Jeeves and Wooster, they're both the television show and the books by P.G. Wodehouse are very, very good. They're both excellent in their own way. I feel that while they did weave some things together for the television show, they kept true to the personality of the characters from the story. They may have combined people, but again, they tried to stay true to the spirit of what was written by P.G. Wodehouse. So both of these are very well worth your time. And again, it's not so much, in my mind, an instance of slapstick comedy in any case. So I did not find myself laughing uproariously at what I was reading, but I did find myself highly enjoying the series, and it was just those amusing situations where you had a comedy of errors, if you will, instead of, like I said, instead of the slapstick. So, highly recommend My Man Jeeves and the other stories by P.G. Wodehouse. So, if you have some opinions, please let me know. Like and subscribe, comment down below, all that other stuff. And as always, enjoy what you're reading.